The shuttle bay doors hissed open with a mechanical groan that echoed through the massive space station. Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped out, her simple black diplomatic suit looking modest compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the alien delegates around her. She carried only a small briefcase and wore no visible weapons or status symbols. The Galactic Council station buzzed with activity. Hundreds of species moved through the corridors, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic translations. Sarah had been here before, but today felt different. The air carried tension like electricity before a storm. "The human representative has arrived," announced Zekthar, the tall reptilian being who served as the Council's protocol officer. His scaled face showed no emotion, but Sarah caught the slight dismissive tone in his voice. To him, she was just another minor species delegate from a backwater planet. As Sarah walked through the main corridor, other delegates barely glanced her way. The towering Krillian warriors with their forearms and battle scars discussed military tactics in their booming voices. The ethereal Vashtai floated past in their energy forms, their thoughts visible as colored lights dancing around their translucent bodies. The insectoid hive queens clicked and chittered, their compound eyes tracking multiple conversations simultaneously. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago. Humans were still considered newcomers, barely worth notice among civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Most species saw them as primitive beings who had just learned to leave their home planet. Sarah found her assigned quarters in the diplomatic wing. The room was small and functional, with a single window overlooking the station's industrial sector. She unpacked her few belongings and activated her personal communication device to check messages from Earth. 3 urgent transmissions waited for her. The first came from General Harrison at Earth Defense Command. His weathered face appeared on the holographic display, lines of worry creasing his forehead. "Sarah, the situation has gotten worse since you left. The Zarathi Empire has destroyed another 3 colonies in the Outer Rim. The Council's peacekeeping forces can't stop them. We're losing this war, and badly." The second message came from Dr. Elizabeth Santos, Earth's chief scientist. Her normally calm demeanor showed cracks of exhaustion and fear. "The Zarathi technology is beyond anything we've seen. Their ships regenerate damage faster than we can inflict it. Their weapons tear through our strongest shields like paper. The other Council species are talking about surrender. Some are already negotiating separate peace treaties." The third transmission made Sarah's blood run cold. It came from her younger brother Marcus, a captain in the Earth Space Navy. "Sis, I don't know if you'll get this message. We're trapped in the Centauri system. The Zarathi have us surrounded. Mom and Dad, the colony on New Geneva. It's gone, Sarah, the whole planet. 3 billion people just gone. Whatever you're doing up there at the Council, please hurry. We can't hold out much longer." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The weight of 3 billion deaths pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. Her parents had been among the colonists on New Geneva, living their retirement years in peace before the war started. Now they were nothing but atomic dust floating in space. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Sarah quickly composed herself and opened it to find Ambassador Veltar of the Andromedans. The tall, blue-skinned humanoid had been one of the few council members to show humans any respect. "Ambassador Chen, I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's emergency session," Veltar said, his voice carrying genuine concern. "The situation is dire. The Zarathi Empire has become unstoppable. Their latest attacks show they're not just conquering territory anymore. They're committing genocide against entire species." Sarah invited him in, and they sat at the small table near the window. Outside, the lights of passing ships created streaks of color against the stars. "How bad is it, really?" Sarah asked. Veltar's expression grew grim. "Worse than the public reports indicate. The Zarathi have destroyed 47 worlds in the past month. The Crystalline Collective surrendered yesterday after losing their homeworld. The Aquatic Federation is evacuating their core systems. Even the mighty Krillian Empire is pulling back their fleets." And the Council's response? Divided. Half want to negotiate surrender terms before more species go extinct. The other half want to continue fighting, but they have no strategy that works against Zarathi technology. Their ships are completely immune to conventional weapons. Sarah stood and walked to the window, watching the controlled chaos of the station's traffic patterns. Ships of every conceivable design moved in carefully orchestrated paths, following protocols developed over thousands of years. What about Earth's request for advanced weapons technology? she asked. Veltar shook his head sadly. Denied again. The Military Technology Committee believes human ships are too primitive to make effective use of Council weapons. They think giving you better guns would be like arming children with plasma cannons. A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. If only they knew the truth. If only they understood what humans were really capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. There's something else, Veltar continued. Some Council members are suggesting that the newer species like humanity should be sacrificed to buy time for the older civilizations to escape. They're calling it the Greater Good Protocol. Sarah turned from the window, her face calm but her eyes hard as diamond. They want to feed us to the Zarathi while they run away. I'm afraid so. Tomorrow's vote will likely decide the fate of dozens of species, including yours. After Veltar left, Sarah sat alone in the darkening room. The station's artificial day cycle was winding down, and most of the diplomatic quarter had grown quiet. She pulled out a small device that looked like a simple data pad, but contained her most closely guarded secret. The device displayed a single file labeled, Project Prometheus, Final Authorization Required. Sarah's finger hovered over the confirmation button. Once she pressed it, there would be no going back. The galaxy would learn exactly what humans could do when everything they loved was threatened with destruction. But for now, she was content to let the other species see her as just another desperate ambassador from a weak, primitive world. Tomorrow's council session would be very interesting indeed. Sarah Chen smiled in the darkness, and for just a moment, her eyes reflected the cold light of distant stars. The council chamber stretched before Sarah like a vast amphitheater, carved from a single piece of crystalline material. Thousands of delegates filled the tiered seating, representing over 800 species from across the galaxy. The architecture was designed to inspire awe and humility, reminding everyone of their small place in the cosmic order. Sarah took her assigned seat in the section reserved for developing civilizations. The chairs around her held representatives from species that had joined the council within the last century. Most looked nervous and uncertain, clutching data pads with prepared speeches they hoped might save their worlds. High above them sat the Elder Council, the ancient species who had founded galactic civilization millions of years ago. The eternal minds appeared as shifting geometric patterns of pure thought. The first builders manifested as intricate metal sculptures that somehow conveyed consciousness. These beings had transcended physical form so long ago that few remembered what they originally looked like. The emergency session will now commence, announced the voice of the council, a being so old that it existed as pure sound, its words resonating through crystalline speakers embedded in the chamber walls. We gather to address the Zarathi crisis and determine our path forward. Fleet Admiral Korax of the Krillian Empire stood first. His massive frame was covered in battle scars, and his forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. The Krillians had been the galaxy's premier military force for over 50,000 years. Honored council members, I must report that our forces have suffered catastrophic losses. The Zarathi war machine has proven unstoppable. Their ships regenerate faster than we can damage them. Their weapons penetrate our strongest defenses. In 3 months of fighting, we have not destroyed a single Zarathi vessel. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. If the legendary Krillian military couldn't stop the Zarathi, what hope did anyone else have? Our intelligence suggests the Zarathi have developed technology that exists partially outside normal space-time, Korax continued. Their hulls phase between dimensions, making conventional weapons useless. They can absorb energy from our attacks and redirect it as fuel for their own systems. Queen Velshara of the Hive Collective rose next. Her insectoid form clicked and chittered as she spoke through her translator. The mathematical certainty is clear. At current rates of Zarathi expansion, 73% of Council worlds will be destroyed within 1 galactic standard year. The only logical solution is immediate negotiation for surrender terms. Surrender? Roared Ambassador Thorgan of the Volcanic Worlds. His rock-like skin glowed with internal heat as his anger flared. My people have never surrendered to anyone. We will fight until our worlds are molten slag. And achieve what? Queen Velshara responded coldly. The extinction of your species for the sake of pride? Logic demands survival. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in hundreds of different languages while their translators struggled to keep up. Some species called for total war, others for immediate surrender. A few suggested fleeing to distant galaxies entirely. Sarah sat quietly through it all, watching and listening. She noted which species were willing to fight and which were ready to abandon their weaker neighbors. The patterns of alliance and betrayal were becoming clear. Finally, ancient Counselor Zareth of the Elder Council spoke. Its voice carried the weight of eons, silencing the chamber instantly. The Elder Council has reviewed all military reports and strategic assessments. The mathematical probability of victory against the Zarathi Empire using conventional methods is effectively zero. Therefore, we propose implementation of the Greater Good Protocol. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the oldest species recognize this as the ultimate desperate measure. The Greater Good Protocol, Zareth continued, requires the sacrifice of peripheral species to buy time for core civilizations to establish new defensive positions in distant sectors. Those species with less than 100 years of council membership will be designated as expendable buffers. Sarah felt the eyes of the chamber turn toward the developing civilizations section. Over 40 species would be abandoned to the Zarathi as living shields. Billions of intelligent beings would die to buy the older species a few more months of life. Ambassador Veltar of the Andromedans stood abruptly. This is monstrous. We cannot sacrifice entire civilizations. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, replied Counselor Narvex of the Crystalline Collective. Better that some survive than all perish together. Who decides which lives are worth more? Demanded Captain Rutar of the Oceanic Federation. By what right do we condemn billions to death? The argument raged for hours. Species after species voiced their opinions, but the underlying message was clear. The powerful would survive by feeding the weak to their enemies. As the debate continued, Sarah quietly activated her datapad and began accessing files. To any observer, she appeared to be reviewing Earth's pitiful military statistics or preparing a desperate plea for mercy. In reality, she was uploading authorization codes to a network of hidden satellites positioned throughout human space. The Prometheus network had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for the past 5 years. While the Council saw humans as primitive newcomers, Earth scientists had been working on technologies that would have seemed impossible to most galactic civilizations. Humans had one advantage that older species had forgotten about. They were young enough to think differently. While ancient civilizations relied on proven methods refined over millions of years, humans approached problems with fresh perspectives and dangerous creativity. The human representative will now address the Council, announced the voice. Sarah stood slowly, her simple black suit contrasting sharply with the elaborate regalia around her. She walked to the central speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. 800 species watched her with mixtures of pity, dismissal, and curiosity. Honored Council members, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic design. I have listened to your debates and your proposals. I understand that you see humanity as expendable, fit only to serve as a delaying tactic against an unstoppable enemy. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably at her blunt words, but none contradicted her. You believe the Zarathi cannot be defeated because their technology is beyond your understanding. You think conventional weapons are useless against their dimensional phasing abilities. Sarah paused and looked up at the Elder Council's elevated platform. You are wrong on both counts. A ripple of surprise ran through the chamber. Several delegates laughed outright at the audacity of this young species contradicting the accumulated wisdom of eons. I am curious about your reasoning, human representative, said ancient Counselor Zareth, its tone carrying amused condescension. Please enlighten us with your species' insights. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the station, she allowed her true nature to show through her diplomatic facade. The Zarathi Empire will be destroyed within 72 hours, not by conventional weapons, not by ancient technologies, but by something you have all forgotten how to do. The chamber held its breath. Think like prey that has been backed into a corner. The laughter that erupted from the council chamber was like a wave crashing against rocks. Delegates from ancient civilizations found the humans' confidence both amusing and insulting. How dare this representative from a species barely capable of interstellar travel claim she could solve a problem that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy? 72 hours? Wheezed Ambassador Glickstar of the Mercantile Union, his gelatinous form jiggling with mirth. My dear primitive creature, the combined fleets of 16 major civilizations have barely managed to slow the Zarathi advance. What could your tiny world possibly do? Fleet Admiral Korak slammed one of his 4 fists on his chair's armrest. This is insulting. The human mocks our losses with impossible boasts. My warriors have died fighting these monsters while her people hide behind defensive stations. But not everyone was laughing. Ambassador Veltar of the Andromedans studied Sarah's face carefully. Something in her expression reminded him of the look predators got just before they struck. Ancient Counselor Zareth also seemed intrigued, its geometric patterns shifting into configurations that suggested deep thought. I appreciate the entertainment value of your confidence, said Queen Velshara of the Hive Collective, her compound eyes glittering with cold amusement. However, mathematical probability indicates your species has a 0.003% chance of contributing meaningfully to this conflict. Sarah walked slowly around the central platform, making eye contact with delegates throughout the chamber. Her movement was unhurried, almost casual, but there was something predatory in the way she moved. Tell me, she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. What do you know about Earth's history? Enough, replied Counselor Havrex of the Silicon Dynasties, a young species that evolved on a backwater world. Recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Primitive technology, limited military capability, unremarkable in every measurable way. Unremarkable, Sarah repeated, tasting the word. Yes, that's what we wanted you to think. She stopped walking and faced the Elder Council directly. You see, there's something about human psychology that your species assessments missed. When we're threatened with extinction, we don't just fight harder, we become something else entirely. Sarah activated her data pad, and holographic displays materialized above the central platform. The images showed Earth's historical timeline, but not the sanitized version most species had seen. This is our real history. In the past century alone, we fought 2 global wars that killed over 100 million of our own people. We developed weapons capable of sterilizing our entire planet. We created artificial intelligences that could have destroyed us, then figured out how to control them. We split the atom, mapped our genetic code, and learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. The holographic timeline showed humanity's technological progress accelerating at an exponential rate. Delegates began to shift uncomfortably as they realized how much had been accomplished in such a short time. But here's what really makes humans dangerous, Sarah continued. We've been fighting among ourselves for thousands of years. We know every possible way to kill, destroy, and survive. War isn't just something we do. It's what shaped us into what we are. Admiral Korax leaned forward, his warrior instincts recognizing something in Sarah's tone. You speak of war as if it were an art form. For humans it is. While your species developed advanced technology over millions of years, we compressed the same progress into centuries through constant conflict. We learned to innovate under pressure, to find solutions when survival was at stake. The chamber grew quieter as delegates began to realize this wasn't empty boasting. The humans' confidence seemed to be based on something real and terrifying. The Zarathi Empire believes their dimensional phasing technology makes them invincible, Sarah said. They're right from a conventional perspective. Energy weapons can't lock onto targets that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Physical projectiles pass through their hulls harmlessly. She touched her datapad again, and new images appeared in the holographic display. These showed complex mathematical equations and technical diagrams that most delegates couldn't understand. But humans have a saying, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The Zarathi assume everyone will keep using the same old hammers because that's all they know. They never considered that someone might build an entirely different kind of tool. Queen Velshara's antennae twitched with interest despite herself. What kind of tool? Sarah smiled, and this time there was nothing diplomatic about it. It was the smile of an apex predator that had been hiding among sheep. We call it a reality anchor. Instead of trying to hit targets that phase between dimensions, we lock them into a single-dimensional state. Once they're trapped in normal spacetime, they become vulnerable to conventional weapons. The technical implications hit the more scientifically minded delegates immediately. Several species known for their advanced physics began frantically consulting their own data pads. "That's theoretically impossible," announced Dr. Krixval of the Research Collective. "The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of a medium-sized star." "For your technology, yes," Sarah agreed. "But you've been building on the same foundations for millions of years. You've optimized and refined, but you haven't fundamentally reimagined the basic principles." She gestured to the holographic equations. "Humans approach the problem differently. Instead of trying to generate enough energy to force a dimensional lock, we found a way to make the universe itself do the work for us. We're not fighting physics, we're convincing it to take our side." Ancient Counselor Zareth's patterns shifted into configurations that suggested extreme surprise. "You have weaponized quantum mechanics itself?" "We've done much more than that," Sarah replied. "The reality anchors are just the delivery system. The actual weapon is something we learned to build after studying the Zarathi's own technology." The chamber fell into complete silence. Even the ambient noise of the station's life support system seemed to fade away. "During the attack on New Geneva, we recovered fragments of Zarathi hull material. Our scientists spent 3 months analyzing it, learning how the dimensional phasing worked. Then they asked themselves a very human question. If we can't destroy it from the outside, what happens if we attack it from the inside?" Sarah's expression grew cold as she remembered her parents' death. "We built quantum viruses, microscopic programs that exist at the subatomic level. Once they infect a Zarathi ship's dimensional matrix, they spread throughout the entire vessel and begin rewriting its basic physical properties." The implications struck the chamber like a thunderbolt. Ambassador Veltar stood up slowly, his blue skin pale with shock. "You're not just planning to defeat them, you're planning to turn their own technology against them." "Every Zarathi ship that has attacked a human world has been infected," Sarah confirmed. "The virus spreads through their fleet networks every time they communicate with each other. By now it has reached every vessel in their empire." Fleet Admiral Korax's scarred face showed a mixture of admiration and horror. "What happens when you activate this weapon?" Sarah looked around the chamber, making sure every delegate understood the magnitude of what she was revealing. "Their ships will phase shift into a dimension where the laws of physics work differently. A dimension where matter and energy cannot exist in the forms the Zarathi understand. Their entire fleet will simply cease to be." The silence stretched for long moments before Ancient Counselor Zareth spoke. "You are describing the annihilation of an entire species." "Yes," Sarah replied without hesitation. "They chose extinction for others. Now they get to experience it themselves." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates leaped from their seats, some shouting accusations while others demanded explanations. The revelation that humans had secretly developed a weapon capable of destroying an entire species sent shockwaves through the assembled civilizations. "This is barbaric," screamed Ambassador Thelvas of the Peaceful Gardens Coalition. "Genocide is the greatest crime in galactic law. You cannot simply erase an entire species from existence." Sarah remained calm in the center of the storm, her hands clasped behind her back. "The Zarathi have already committed genocide against 47 species. 3 billion humans died on New Geneva alone. How many more worlds must burn before you call their actions barbaric?" Fleet Admiral Korax was studying the technical data on his personal display, his warrior mind grasping the implications faster than most. "The scale of this weapon, it would affect every Zarathi simultaneously. Across their entire empire, there would be no survivors, no chance for surrender." "That's the point," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "You can't negotiate with a species that views all other life as food to be consumed. The Zarathi don't take prisoners. They don't accept surrender. They don't even communicate except to demand total submission before they begin harvesting your population." Queen Velshara's compound eyes fixed on Sarah with new intensity. "The mathematical implications are staggering. A weapon that can target an entire species based on quantum signatures. Such technology could be adapted to destroy any species you choose." The chamber fell silent as that thought sank in. Every delegate suddenly realized they weren't just witnessing the end of the Zarathi threat. They were seeing the emergence of a new apex predator in galactic politics. Ambassador Veltar stood slowly, his diplomatic training helping him find words when others couldn't. "Sarah, surely you understand how this appears to the Council. Humans have revealed themselves to possess the most dangerous technology in known history. How can we trust that you won't use this weapon against other species? Sarah turned to face him directly. Of all the delegates present, Veltar had shown humans the most respect and kindness. She owed him an honest answer. You're right to be concerned, she admitted. This technology makes humanity the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But consider this. We could have used these weapons at any time during the past 5 years. We could have eliminated our competitors, seized territory, built an empire. Instead, we chose to remain hidden, to let others see us as weak and primitive. She gestured to the chaos around them. Look at how you're reacting to the mere possibility of our power. If we had revealed this earlier, you would have united against us immediately. The entire galaxy would have declared war on humanity before we'd finished explaining what we'd built. Ancient, Counselor Zareth's geometric patterns shifted into configurations that suggested deep contemplation. You allowed your people to die rather than reveal your capabilities. Why? Because we hoped it wouldn't be necessary, Sarah said quietly. Humans prefer to solve problems without violence when possible. We wanted to find a diplomatic solution to the Zarathi crisis. We wanted to believe that galactic civilization could protect its member species. Her voice hardened. But when you voted to implement the greater good protocol, when you decided to sacrifice the newer species to save yourselves, you proved that diplomacy has limits. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something even more monstrous. Dr. Krixval of the Research Collective had been frantically analyzing the weapon data. His crystalline form began glowing with agitation as he processed the implications. The energy cascade from simultaneous quantum dissolution across an empire spanning hundreds of star systems. The gravitational distortions alone could destabilize entire sectors. You're talking about reshaping the local galactic structure. Sarah nodded grimly. We know. Our simulations suggest the collapse of the Zarathi Empire will create a power vacuum that could lead to decades of instability. Some star systems will be temporarily inaccessible due to quantum interference. Trade routes will need to be re-established. The political balance of the galaxy will shift dramatically. And you're willing to cause all of that disruption? Demanded Counselor Havrex of the Silicon Dynasties. Are you willing to let the Zarathi continue their genocidal expansion? Sarah shot back. Every day we debate, more worlds die. More species go extinct. The disruption from stopping them is nothing compared to the devastation they'll cause if left unchecked. Fleet Admiral Korax stood and approached the central platform. His massive frame and battle-scarred appearance made most delegates unconsciously step back, but Sarah held her ground as he studied her. You speak of becoming monsters to fight monsters, he said slowly. My people understand this concept. Sometimes honorable warriors must dirty their hands to protect the innocent. But tell me, human, what stops you from becoming the very evil you seek to destroy? It was the question Sarah had been dreading, the one that kept her awake during the long journey to the station. She looked up at the towering Krillian warrior and saw not suspicion but understanding in his eyes. Nothing, she admitted. Once we activate this weapon, once we prove that humanity can destroy entire species at will, we become the thing everyone fears. We'll be the new existential threat that unites the galaxy against us. Then why do it? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking of her parents, her brother trapped in the Centauri system, the billions of dead on dozens of worlds. Because someone has to be willing to become the monster. Someone has to be willing to sacrifice their soul to save everyone else's lives. And maybe that's what humans are for. Maybe we're the species that does the terrible things others can't do themselves. The chamber had grown so quiet that individual heartbeats could be heard among the more humanoid species. The weight of Sarah's words settled over the assembled delegates like a blanket of lead. Ancient Counselor Zareth spoke into the silence. If you proceed with this action, humanity will never be trusted again. You will be forever marked as the species that chose genocide as a solution to conflict. I know, Sarah replied, but our children will be alive to hate us for it. That's more than the Zarathi would leave them. She activated her datapad one final time, bringing up a simple interface with a single button marked Execute. Her finger hovered over it as she looked around the chamber. I'm giving you one last chance to find another solution. Does anyone here have a better plan? Any strategy that doesn't involve feeding the newer species to an unstoppable enemy? The silence stretched for minutes. Species that had debated for millennia found themselves speechless in the face of humanity's terrible clarity. Finally, Queen Velshara spoke. The mathematical certainty is absolute. No conventional strategy can defeat the Zerathi. Your weapon appears to be the only viable solution. Even if it makes us the new threat everyone has to worry about, Sarah asked. Perhaps, ancient counselor Zareth said slowly, the galaxy needs a new kind of threat. One that chooses when and how to act, rather than one that devours everything in its path. Sarah looked down at the button that would change everything. Once pressed, there would be no going back. Humanity would emerge from this crisis as either saviors or the next great evil in galactic history. 72 hours, she said quietly. That's how long it will take for the quantum virus to finish propagating through their network. After that, the Zerathi Empire ends and humanity's real story begins. Sarah pressed the button. The interface flashed green for exactly 3 seconds, then went dark. Across human space, hidden satellites received the activation signal and began broadcasting quantum instructions to virus-infected Zerathi ships. The countdown to extinction had begun. It's done, Sarah announced to the stunned council chamber. The Prometheus protocol is now active. In 72 hours, the Zerathi Empire will cease to exist. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some delegates cheered while others shouted accusations. Ambassador Thelvis of the Peaceful Gardens Coalition collapsed into his seat, his flower-like head petals closing in shock. Fleet Admiral Korax nodded grimly, recognizing the cold necessity of Sarah's choice. You've condemned an entire species based on your own judgment, screamed Counselor Havrex. Who gave humans the right to decide who lives and who dies? Sarah turned to face him, her expression carved from stone. The same authority that gave you the right to sacrifice 43 younger species for your own survival. The difference is that we're willing to accept the consequences of our choice. Ancient Counselor Zareth's geometric patterns shifted rapidly, processing the implications of what had just occurred. The quantum cascade has begun. Our sensors are detecting subtle dimensional fluctuations throughout Zerathi space. The infected ships are beginning to destabilize. On the chamber's main display, real-time tactical maps showed the positions of Zerathi fleets across dozens of star systems. Red markers indicated infected vessels, and the network of quantum corruption was spreading faster than most delegates had believed possible. Dr. Krixval's crystalline form pulsed with frantic energy as he analyzed the incoming data. The propagation rate exceeds all theoretical models. The virus is using the Zerathi's own communication networks to spread exponentially. Every time they attempt to coordinate their fleets, they're accelerating their own destruction. How long until we see actual results? Asked Queen Velshara, her compound eyes tracking the spreading infection markers. Initial phase shift failures should begin within 6 hours, Sarah replied, consulting her datapad. Complete dimensional collapse will occur over the following 66 hours, as the quantum virus reaches critical mass in each infected system. Ambassador Veltar approached the central platform, his blue skin pale with the magnitude of what was happening. Sarah, there are civilian populations in those fleets. Zerathi family ships, merchant vessels, exploration craft. Not all of them are warriors. Sarah's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing the pain beneath. I know, but the Zerathi don't separate their civilians from their military. Their entire species is organized around conquest and consumption. Every ship in their fleet participates in their genocidal expansion. That doesn't make their children responsible for their parents' crimes, Veltar pressed. No, Sarah agreed quietly. But it also doesn't make our children responsible for stopping crimes they didn't commit. Someone has to choose which innocents live and which innocents die. Today I chose ours. The tactical display suddenly erupted with new activity. Warning symbols appeared throughout Zerathi space as their ships began experiencing dimensional instabilities. Fleet formations that had seemed invincible moments before started showing system failures and navigation errors. First phase shift failures detected, announced the station's tactical officer. Zerathi vessels in the Proxima sector are reporting critical dimensional matrix errors. Fleet Admiral Korax leaned forward, his warrior instincts analyzing the battle reports. They're trying to emergency jump to hyperspace, but their phase drives are malfunctioning. Some ships are getting trapped partially in normal space. The main display zoomed in on the affected region, showing Zerathi vessels flickering between dimensions like dying stars. Their usual graceful movement became erratic and desperate as ships that had seemed untouchable began breaking apart under dimensional stress. This is just the beginning, Sarah said, watching the display with mixed emotions. As more ships try to use their dimensional technology, the virus will spread faster. Their attempts to escape will only accelerate their destruction. Suddenly, priority alerts began flashing throughout the chamber. The station's communication officer announced incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. Emergency signals from multiple sectors. Zarathi fleets are experiencing simultaneous system failures. They're requesting immediate assistance from anyone willing to help them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The species that had refused all diplomatic contact, except to demand surrender, was now begging for aid from the civilizations they had been systematically destroying. Some of their messages are being directed specifically to the human delegation, the communication officer continued. They're offering complete surrender, territorial concessions, and reparations in exchange for assistance with their dimensional matrix failures. All eyes turned to Sarah. For the first time since the crisis began, the Zarathi were willing to negotiate. They were offering everything the Council had wanted, everything that could have prevented this catastrophe. Too late, Sarah said simply. The quantum virus can't be stopped once it reaches critical propagation. Even if we wanted to help them, the physics won't allow it. You could try, Ambassador Thelvis pleaded. Surely your scientists could develop a countermeasure if they worked with Zarathi technical specialists. Sarah shook her head. We designed the virus specifically to be irreversible. Any attempt to interfere with the quantum cascade would risk spreading the effect to other dimensional technologies. We could accidentally destroy every faster-than-light capable ship in the galaxy. The tactical display showed the infection spreading through the Zarathi fleet networks like wildfire. Ships that tried to help their infected comrades became infected themselves. Every communication, every rescue attempt, every effort to coordinate a response only made the situation worse. Estimated time to complete fleet dissolution, 67 hours, 43 minutes, Dr. Krixval reported, his voice hollow with the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Queen Velshara turned her compound eyes toward Sarah. What happens after the Zarathi are gone? How does the galaxy deal with a species that has proven capable of this level of destruction? It was the question everyone had been thinking, but few dared to ask. Sarah had expected it and prepared her answer during the long journey to the station. That depends on you, she replied. Humans have revealed our true capabilities because the situation demanded it. But we have no desire to rule the galaxy or impose our will on other species. We want the same thing we've always wanted, to be left alone to develop in peace. And if other species feel threatened by your weapons? Pressed Ancient Counselor Zareth. Then they'll have to decide if they want to test them, Sarah said bluntly. We've proven that humanity will go to any length to protect itself and its allies. The question is whether the galaxy will learn from the Zarathi's mistake or repeat it. Fleet Admiral Korak stood and walked to the central platform. His massive frame cast a shadow over Sarah, but she didn't step back. You've changed the balance of power forever, he said. No species will ever again be able to threaten extinction-level warfare without considering whether humans might respond in kind. That was the point, Sarah confirmed. Peace through superior firepower has always been a human concept. We're just applying it on a galactic scale. The chamber's displays continued showing the progressive collapse of Zarathi civilization. Ship after ship winked out of existence as their dimensional matrices failed catastrophically. The empire that had threatened to devour the galaxy was dissolving like salt in water. But even as they watched their enemies die, the assembled delegates knew they were witnessing the birth of something far more dangerous. Humanity had revealed itself to be a species capable of calculated, methodical genocide. They had shown they could smile diplomatically while engineering the destruction of entire civilizations. The Council will need time to process these events, Ancient Counselor Zareth announced. This session is suspended pending the complete resolution of the Zarathi situation. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, many gave Sarah a wide berth. Some looked at her with fear, others with grudging respect, and a few with something approaching admiration. But all of them looked at her differently than they had just hours before. Sarah remained at the central platform, watching the tactical displays as more Zarathi ships disappeared from the galaxy's star charts. Each vanishing marker represented thousands of lives, an entire species being erased by human ingenuity and determination. Ambassador Veltar approached her as the chamber emptied. Do you regret it? he asked quietly. Sarah considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that diplomacy failed. I regret that an entire species chose extinction over coexistence. But do I regret stopping them? No. She looked up at the displays showing the continuing collapse of the Zarathi Empire. In 66 hours, the immediate threat will be over. But the real work starts after that. Humanity has to learn how to live with what we've become. 60 hours after Sarah pressed the button, the last Zarathi ships vanished from the galaxy's sensors. The quantum virus had completed its work with terrifying efficiency, erasing an empire that had spanned hundreds of star systems in less than 3 days. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the council station, watching the stars through the massive transparent aluminum windows. Where Zarathi fleets had once moved in deadly formations, now only empty space remained. The silence was profound and unsettling. Behind her, the station buzzed with activity as delegates tried to understand the new galactic order. Emergency sessions had been called by dozens of species. Military alliances were being hastily renegotiated, and trade routes were being redrawn around the massive void left by the Zarathi's disappearance. The refugees are arriving, announced Ambassador Veltar, as he joined her at the window. Transport ships filled with survivors from Zarathi-occupied worlds were streaming toward council space, carrying the few populations that had managed to escape before the collapse. Sarah nodded but didn't turn from the window. How many made it out? Preliminary reports suggest about 8 million beings from 17 different species. It's a fraction of what the Zarathi conquered, but it's something. 8 million survivors out of billions killed. Sarah said quietly, I suppose we should be grateful for small miracles. Veltar studied her profile, noting the exhaustion lines around her eyes and the way her shoulders sagged. Despite her attempt to maintain diplomatic posture, the council is calling you a hero. The species that survived the Zarathi occupation are building shrines in humanity's honor. And the others are terrified of you, Veltar admitted. 3 major alliances have already formed specifically to contain human expansion. The Crystalline Collective has proposed a formal treaty limiting your weapons development. The Elder Council is debating whether to classify humanity as a restricted species. Sarah finally turned from the window, and Veltar was struck by how much older she looked than when she'd first arrived at the station. The weight of genocide, even justified genocide, had carved new lines in her face. Let them try to contain us, she said. We've proven that humans don't respond well to external limitations. The smarter species will choose cooperation over confrontation. What about the others? Sarah's expression hardened. They'll learn to be smarter or they'll join the Zarathi in extinction. The cold certainty in her voice sent a chill down Veltar's spine. This wasn't the desperate ambassador who had arrived just days ago. This was someone who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, who had become comfortable with the idea of entire species dying for the crime of threatening humanity. Sarah, you can't seriously be considering— I'm not considering anything, she interrupted. I'm simply stating facts. Humanity has revealed its true nature. We're a species that will commit genocide to protect ourselves and our allies. Other civilizations can accept that reality and work with us accordingly, or they can test our resolve and face the consequences. A communication alert chimed, and Sarah's datapad displayed an urgent message from Earth. She read it quickly, her expression shifting from weariness to grim satisfaction. The quantum virus has finished its work, she announced. Our deep space sensors confirm 0 Zarathi life signs anywhere in the galaxy. The species is extinct. The finality of it hung in the air like a tombstone. An entire branch of life that had evolved over millions of years, that had created art and music and literature and love, had been erased by human ingenuity in 72 hours. There's something else, Sarah continued, reading further into the message. Our scientists have been analyzing the dimensional collapse data. The quantum cascade created some unexpected secondary effects. What kind of effects? Sarah showed him the data on her pad. Complex energy readings and gravitational measurements filled the screen with numbers that meant little to a diplomat but suggested something significant to scientists. The destruction of so many dimensional phase drives simultaneously has torn holes in the fabric of space-time itself. We're detecting anomalous readings in 17 star systems that formerly housed major Zarathi installations. Veltar felt another chill of premonition. Holes in space-time? What does that mean? We're not entirely sure yet, Sarah admitted. But preliminary analysis suggests we may have accidentally created gateways to other dimensions. Parallel universes where evolution took different paths, where different species developed instead of those we know. The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. You're talking about potential contact with entirely alien forms of life. Beings from realities where the laws of physics might work differently. It's possible, Sarah agreed. Our xenobiologists are calling it the greatest discovery in galactic history. The opportunity to study completely alternate forms of existence, to learn from civilizations that developed under entirely different conditions, or to encounter threats that make the Zarathi look like peaceful explorers, Veltar pointed out. Sarah smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Let them come. Humanity has proven we can handle existential threats. If these dimensional refugees want to test us, they'll learn the same lesson the Zarathi did. You're talking about potentially infinite numbers of hostile species from countless alternate realities. And we're talking about humans who have already crossed the line into species-wide genocide, Sarah replied calmly. Do you really think we'll hesitate to do it again if necessary? The observation deck fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Veltar realized he was looking at the birth of something entirely new in galactic politics. A species that had not only proven capable of ultimate warfare but had become comfortable with it. What happens now? He asked finally. Sarah turned back to the window, watching as more refugee ships arrived carrying survivors of the Zarathi's genocidal expansion. Some of them carried species that had been enslaved for generations, now free for the first time in their racial memory. Now we clean up the mess, she said. Humanity will take responsibility for administering the former Zarathi territories. We'll help resettle the refugee populations and establish new governments for the liberated worlds. And if other species object to human expansion into Zarathi space, they're welcome to voice their concerns through diplomatic channels, Sarah replied. But they should remember that we've just demonstrated our approach to solving intractable problems. A new group of delegates entered the observation deck, led by Fleet Admiral Corax and Queen Velshara. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but Veltar could sense the tension radiating from them. Ambassador Chen, Corax began formally, the Emergency Military Council has reached some preliminary conclusions about the new galactic situation. Sarah turned to face them, her diplomatic mask sliding back into place. I'm listening. The immediate Zarathi threat has been eliminated, Queen Velshara stated. However, the power vacuum created by their destruction has destabilized 17 sectors. Multiple species are moving military assets toward former Zarathi territories. Some are claiming salvage rights to abandoned Zarathi technology, Corax added. Others are asserting territorial claims based on historical grievances. We're looking at potential conflicts involving dozens of species. Sarah consulted her datapad, reviewing reports from human intelligence assets throughout the galaxy. The political situation was indeed becoming chaotic as various civilizations tried to capitalize on the Zarathi's sudden absence. Humanity is prepared to serve as interim administrator for the affected territories, she announced. We have the military capability to maintain order and the technological expertise to safely dismantle any remaining Zarathi installations. Under whose authority? Demanded Queen Velshara. Sarah smiled. Under the authority of the species that just eliminated a galactic-level threat, while the Council debated surrender terms. I think our credentials speak for themselves. The assembled delegates exchanged glances, each recognizing the subtle threat beneath Sarah's diplomatic language. Humanity wasn't asking for permission to take control of former Zarathi space. They were informing the galaxy of what was going to happen. The Council will need to vote on any territorial administration proposals, Corax said carefully. Of course, Sarah agreed, but I should mention that our preliminary scans have detected several active Zarathi weapons platforms that survived the dimensional collapse. They're apparently automated systems designed to activate if the main fleet was ever destroyed. Someone will need to neutralize them before they can target populated worlds. The threat was clear even without being stated directly. Humanity had proven they could create problems as easily as solve them. Any species that wanted to challenge human administration of Zarathi space would have to deal with whatever dangerous surprises Sarah's people had already discovered. We'll convene an emergency session tomorrow, Queen Velshara said finally. The Council will need time to review all implications of these developments. As the delegates filed out, Veltar remained behind with Sarah. When they were alone again, he turned to her with a mixture of admiration and fear. "You've thought of everything, haven't you? The dimensional rifts, the automated weapons, the refugee." 1 year later, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Human Administration Station in what had once been the heart of Zarathi space. The view outside showed a transformed region of the galaxy, where human ships moved in careful patterns alongside vessels from dozens of refugee species. The year had changed everything. Humanity had indeed taken administrative control of the former Zarathi territories, but not in the way most species had expected. Instead of establishing an empire, humans had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary confederation of species united by shared trauma and mutual protection. The morning briefing, Ambassador announced Captain Torres, Sarah's new aide. The young woman carried herself with the confident bearing of someone born into humanity's new status as a galactic superpower. Sarah accepted the datapad and reviewed the day's agenda. Meetings with refugee resettlement committees, discussions about the dimensional rift monitoring stations, and a video conference with the Galactic Council about the proposed non-aggression accord. "Any word from the deep space exploration teams?" Sarah asked. "Dr. Santos reports that Rift Site 7 has shown increased activity. The dimensional barriers are becoming more permeable and they're detecting what might be artificial signals from the other side." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. The tears in spacetime created by the Zarathi's dimensional collapse had proven to be humanity's greatest discovery and greatest concern. Several of the rifts were definitely showing signs of life from alternate realities, and some of those signs suggested highly advanced civilizations. Security status on the monitoring stations? All 17 sites are operating at full capacity. Admiral Harrison has positioned defense fleets at each location, with orders to treat any dimensional incursions as potential threats until proven otherwise. The precautions were necessary. 3 months ago, something had briefly emerged from Rift Site 12 before retreating back into its native dimension. The entity had been roughly humanoid, but composed of what appeared to be living metal and energy. It had observed the monitoring station for exactly 17 minutes before vanishing, leaving behind only exotic radiation signatures that human scientists were still trying to decode. "What about the council session today?" Sarah asked. Captain Torres consulted her own datapad. 43 species have confirmed participation in the non-aggression accord negotiations. The Krillian Empire and Andromedan Federation are serving as primary mediators. Queen Velshara's Hive Collective is providing mathematical modeling for the treaty enforcement mechanisms. Sarah smiled at that. The year had seen some unexpected alliances form as species that had once viewed humans with suspicion came to appreciate the stability humanity brought to galactic politics. The simple threat of human intervention had prevented 17 separate conflicts from escalating to warfare. Any resistance to the terms? The Silicon dynasties are still objecting to the mutual defense clauses. They don't want to commit to military action if other treaty members are attacked. They'll sign, Sarah said confidently. They remember what happened to the last species that threatened galactic stability. No one wants to test whether humans will treat aggression from council members the same way we treated Zarathi expansion. The truth was that humanity had become the galaxy's unwilling police force, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through the simple demonstration that some species were willing to choose extinction over coexistence. Most civilizations had decided that cooperation with humans was preferable to discovering the limits of human patience. A communication alert chimed, and the main display activated to show Ambassador Veltar calling from the council station. His blue skin looked healthier than it had during the crisis, and his manner had regained much of its diplomatic polish. "Sarah, good to see you again. I trust the resettlement efforts are proceeding smoothly." "Better than expected," Sarah replied. "The Zarathan refugees have established 3 successful colonies in former Zarathi systems. The Aquatic Federation survivors are adapting well to the ocean worlds we've provided. Foe species are showing remarkable resilience once they're free from the constant threat of extinction. That's excellent news. The Council has been impressed by humanity's administrative approach. You've managed to avoid most of the problems we anticipated with such a large-scale territorial transition." Sarah had learned to read between the lines of diplomatic speak. What Veltar was really saying was that the Council had expected humans to behave like traditional conquerors, establishing exploitation systems and demanding tribute from subject populations. Instead, humanity had focused on stability and recovery, asking for nothing more than strategic base rights and trade agreements. "We learned from history," Sarah said. "Empires that rule through fear and oppression eventually face rebellion. Partnerships based on mutual benefit tend to be more stable. Speaking of partnerships, how are the dimensional research projects progressing?" Sarah's expression grew more serious. "We've made some disturbing discoveries. The quantum analysis of the rift energy suggests that the Zarathi weren't native to our dimension either. They may have been refugees from an even more aggressive species in their original reality. The implications hung in the air between them. If the Zarathi had been fleeing something worse than themselves, what did that say about what might still be out there in the infinite expanse of parallel universes? Has there been any evidence of this more dangerous species?" "Not directly," Sarah admitted. "But we've detected what our scientists are calling dimensional scars in several of the rift sites. Damage patterns that suggest something fought its way through the barriers between realities, possibly in pursuit of the Zarathi." Veltar's diplomatic composure slipped slightly. "You're suggesting that destroying the Zarathi may have created a beacon for whatever was hunting them?" "It's possible," Sarah confirmed. "The quantum cascade that eliminated the Zarathi fleet sent ripples throughout the dimensional matrix. Any sufficiently advanced species monitoring interdimensional activity would have noticed the disturbance." "What are you doing about it?" Sarah's smile carried a hint of the predatory confidence that had marked her species' emergence as a galactic power. "We're preparing. Humanity has learned that the universe is full of existential threats, but we've also learned that we're very good at dealing with them. The same way you dealt with the Zarathi." "If necessary," Sarah said without hesitation. "We've refined the quantum virus technology based on what we learned from the Zarathi elimination. The new version can target species based on dimensional origin signatures rather than just genetic markers. If something hostile emerges from the rifts, we'll be ready." The conversation was interrupted by urgent alerts from the station's sensor arrays. Captain Torres quickly consulted her displays and turned to Sarah with barely controlled excitement. "Ambassador, we're detecting massive dimensional disturbances at Rift Site 3. Something big is coming through." Sarah immediately activated the station's command protocols, linking her into the defense network that surrounded every dimensional monitoring site. On the main display, she could see human warships moving into position around the rift as exotic energies began pouring through the tear in space-time. "Scale of the disturbance?" she asked. "Equivalent to approximately 50 Zarathi dreadnoughts," Captain Torres reported. "But the energy signatures are completely different. Whatever's coming through uses technology we've never encountered before. Time to emergence? 17 minutes at current expansion rate." Sarah turned back to her communication with Veltar. "I'm afraid we'll have to continue this conversation later. Humanity may be about to face its next existential threat. Do you want council support?" Veltar asked, though they both knew that conventional weapons would be useless against anything that could traverse dimensional barriers. "Not yet," Sarah replied. "Let's see what we're dealing with first. If this turns out to be another species that thinks genocide is an acceptable negotiating tactic, the galaxy will learn that humanity's approach to problem-solving hasn't changed." As the communication ended, Sarah watched the tactical displays showing the positioning of human forces around Rift Site 3. Admiral Harrison's ships were powerful enough to sterilize entire star systems, armed with weapons derived from the technology that had eliminated the Zarathi Empire. But more importantly, hidden throughout the former Zarathi territories were the Prometheus network satellites, now upgraded with quantum virus variants that could target dimensional travelers. If whatever was emerging from the rift proved hostile, humanity could eliminate it just as thoroughly as they had eliminated its predecessors. "Captain Torres, open a channel to Admiral Harrison," Sarah ordered, "and prepare a priority transmission to Earth. The Defense Council needs to know we may be activating the Dimensional Containment Protocol." As alerts continued to sound throughout the station, Sarah felt the familiar weight of decisions that could determine the fate of civilizations. Once again, humanity would have to choose between diplomacy and annihilation. And once again, Sarah was prepared to make whatever choice was necessary to ensure her species' survival.